It's about 2:15 in the afternoon. I'd like to reconvene the Board of County Commissioners meeting. We have a couple of items left over from the morning. We do have one commissioner that needs to leave a little bit earlier, and he has asked us to move an item up to make sure that he is here. And then as a future agenda item, which is the CRA funding for Parks Lincoln. So I'd like to have staff, because it's going to be that same staff person that's going to be talking about the American Rescue Act and legislative update. May we have
So it's the Tricia show.
the one and only, the famous Deputy County Manager,
She's got a lot to talk about.
Tricia Johnson.
Thank you for that very exciting introduction. I don't think I've ever gotten introduced that way before. Tricia Johnson, Deputy County Manager. And actually, before I speak, Commissioner Zembauer, I know you wanted to bring up the CRA, but I don't want to make assumptions as to what you wanted to speak
That's
about.
what we want to talk about the CRA first. That's a future agenda item. He's got a hard time he has to leave. We wanted to make sure that he was here for that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And I think that'll take at least 20 minutes.
I hope not.
I can guarantee you.
I'm asking for a future agenda item, not making for decision. Yes, thank you very much, and I appreciate moving up. I have a hard 3 o'clock meeting upstairs that I have to attend. But the request is, for those who may or may not know, the CRA funding, which on 1792 beautification has come and gone, no longer exists. But there was funding that was stuck in the Flea World property that had expired for their entitlements. There are needs at the intersection of the Parks Lincoln, where the construction has taken place, and they've taken one of the driveways away from the access. So I asked staff if they could put something together and bring it to the commission for consideration of reallocating that CRA money to an entity that could use it versus sitting there doing nothing before it's completely gone. That's my request.
I have several questions I'd like to ask staff, if you don't mind, Commissioner.
Sure.
So I know that the CRA is sunsetted because I was here when we sunset it. We gave people a deadline to apply for it, and that deadline has come and gone. And I know that those funds are tied to the Reagan Center or the old Flea World property, and there's some legal issues there. So I'd like to at least have county attorney be prepared at some point, because I don't know if we should be doing this, because I think that there are some legal issues with that money being tied up that would need to be addressed before we talk about it. And if we are going to be moving this money to another entity, since it's already sunsetted, we gave people a deadline that, from a legal standpoint, I think we should open it up to the whole corridor for anyone could apply. And at the same token, that there's 5 cities, I believe, or 4 cities were involved with it.
Yes, sir.
And the fire fund and the road fund as all. So we need to understand all that. Is it really worth the pain to go through that, where I think there are other ways to address this?
So
issue?
maybe I can help answer that. So I had our
Please do.
legal people look into that. Flea World's already been put on notice that they're no longer entitled to it. That response has come back. It is part of the Sanford corridor. Portions of that money has to go back to Sanford. And as far as I understand it, legal has gone through all of the hoops to have that money allocated or reallocated for what it's worth. And I'm sure legal staff can give everybody a briefing on that.
You did it almost at the same time.
I know,
So
we
I'd like
do
to
that.
go. So
We do
I'd like to
that.
go to the county attorney first.
That's
and then
where we
we'll
were,
op-
that's
and then we'll-
exactly where we were
I'm
headed.
just trying to be fair, ladies.
Go for it.
Before we go to you all, I'd like to go to the county attorney.
I was just asking you to go to the county
Okay, I
attorney.
didn't-
You're done. One and done.
Is it close to Aurora?
For the record, Paul Chipok, Deputy County Attorney. The CRA has expired. It was for a 10-year term and has expired several years ago. The Flea World agreement was in existence and has not been terminated at this point in time. We've given notice to the current owners of the property that that it's time to terminate that agreement, because again, they can't fulfill the original provisions in the agreement, because the Reagan Center is no longer the project that will be built on that project, and the agreement was specifically tied to the development of the Reagan Center site plan. Once that money is received back, it gets distributed out to the several cities that contributed in, and also the county. Once that money comes back to the county, the remaining funds then go into the general fund, and how you distribute that money out of the general fund is at your discretion. And beyond that, we should probably defer any further action to an agenda item when you can be fully briefed on all the particulars, but that's the general overview.
That's all I was requesting.
Commissioner Lockhart.
Approximately how much money are we talking about?
The agreement is tied to $592,000, and once the monies are dispersed to the cities of Winter Spring, Lake Mary, Castleberry, and Sanford, as well as the Fire Fund and the Roads Fund, which are restricted, we'll have about $307,000 that will go to the general fund.
Yeah. I would like to see all of that take place and then have staff bring back options for how those funds should be redistributed, rather than a specific property owner in the corridor.
Commissioner Herr.
Full disclosure, if it's specific to parks, Longwood, Lincoln, Mercury, they're a client of Highland.
Okay.
I didn't understand.
They are a client.
can't
Oh,
vote.
oh,
They can't
client.
vote.
Thank you. I just didn't hear you.
Well, I was gonna-
If it's specific to
Specific.
Longwood, Lincoln.
Commissioner Constantine.
I would just say if we're, and included with that would be if we are going to distribute it, criteria. So, as to what the suggestion
question-
of the staff would be, as far as criteria.
So the question is, do we want this on an agenda item, future agenda item? I'm hearing no from one commissioner. Do we want this on a future agenda item? I'm hearing-
Not as presented, no.
I don't have a problem putting it on the agenda under the criteria we just talked about, which would be closing out, which they are no longer entitled to, the dollars, is that's what the attorney just said to me.
If I may,
Sir.
the agreement with the current owner of the Reagan Center property it's in their ball court now. We've drafted the agreement, we're waiting for it to come back. When it does come back, it will have to come back to this board for execution by this board. So you will be seeing that regardless of any action you're taking today.
Would that be enough then?
I think so.
No.
Cart before the horse.
Commissioner Herr?
Yeah.
So I think that has to happen first, but it's in motion.
Yep.
And then if there are funds that were allocated for a CRA and we are going to reopen a CRA, then bringing that item back is not a CRA. Then we're going to reopen the distribution of funds that were formerly allotted as a CRA for purposes that may be aligned with what it was for.
Correct.
With criteria.
The bottom line
With
is,
criteria.
at this time, nothing needs to happen until we hear back from the property owner at Five Points, at Reagan Center. And then at that point, this starts to unfold.
Yes.
Does that
Okay.
make sense?
Yep.
Is that adequate?
I'm not real sure.
Okay, what would you like to see?
All I'm asking is, and there's been a lot of conversation, which I don't disagree with at all, when the process is completed, we have a decision to make. The money's either going to sit there and not be used for its intent, or bring us a presentation back from staff on what they believe should be in that corridor considered.
So the way I'm interpreting what Mr. Chipok is saying is that once we get the agreement back from the present property owner of Flea World or Reagan Center.
Right.
Once that comes back, we have to approve it. At that point, then they're going to be asking for directions where to put that money. Is that correct?
Sure. Yes, sir.
So I think
Commissioner Lockhart.
I agree with everything you said, but I think what I heard, and I want to make sure I understand, is the attorney said it automatically goes into the general fund.
That's correct.
Correct.
Okay, so at some point in time, if there is a request to give money out of the general fund to a particular, do those funds not lose their designation once they're put into the general fund, even though they were initially a part of that? It doesn't mean that they have to continue in that corridor. It doesn't mean that they have to continue for that purpose. They've been put in the general fund. Or is that wrong?
The answer to your question is, yes, that is correct. It goes into the general fund. However, you have control over the general fund, so if
Right.
you want to reallocate that money specifically to CRA-like purposes, you can do that. That's within your discretion.
And so would we not do that as a part of the budget process, maybe, when that comes around, when it's in the general, like, I don't feel comfortable committing specific funds for a specific purpose when we don't even have the funds yet, and we don't, I feel like we're really putting the cart before the horse here. And there may be a very great
Sure.
reason to give them those funds, but there also may be other needs in the general fund that we have at that time, whenever that may happen. We had a presentation today talking about red lines and green lines, and so I'd like to, make sure that we're putting the best use of those dollars. where they're
Commissioner
needed
Lockhart, my
most.
thought was, once that agreement comes back to us, when we accept those dollars, now there's another conversation that we need to be had.
Agreed, but I guess what I'm saying is I don't see I know Commissioner Zembauer wants us to commit to putting that on the agenda today for that future time, and what I'm saying is maybe we need to wait until all of those dominoes fall, and then if you want to bring it up at that time, if it seems appropriate, feels
Commissioner
premature.
Zimbardo?
So to be clear, the monies are still sitting in the general fund, correct?
No, they're actually
No.
encumbered in the CRA at this moment.
Right, but we have not allocated or written a check.
No, we cannot until
Right.
this
Understood.
agreement that Paul referred to is executed.
Right,
Yes.
of course. So I'm okay with all of that, whether that agenda item is next month, 2 months from now, whatever it is. All I'm looking for is some support to bring it forward as a CRA unallocated or unused funding for its intended purpose, and staff can come give us a presentation about this is what was spent in the 1792, what's best spent, et cetera, to move it forward. But if you want to take one step at a time, I guess we can do that, but I like to do things multitask. But if we can't do that, so be it.
Commissioner Herr?
I actually don't think we're multitasking. I think we're just staging it. So upon the signature on the document that is sitting in legal, I would say, yes, we would bring the item forward.
That's
It's
fine.
just staging,
And I'm fine.
That's, we're all saying the same thing.
without a separate vote.
Correct.
But he doesn't have to bring a future board item back after the thing is signed. It's now.
I would agree with you. I'd
There
be
we
more than
go.
happy to do that.
Perfect.
But until we have that signature on that document, there's nothing to
We
bring forward.
can't discuss it.
Understood.
Understood.
And I just want to make sure I understand. So are you bringing forward an item at that time that specifically allocates money to Parks Lincoln?
No.
Okay, because that's what your agenda item was a request for.
But we've talked about multiple things. And
That's why I'm
and that's
asking to
the luxury-
clarify where you've landed.
And that's the luxury of having that conversation with my fellow commissioners. I asked for one thing, we've now talked about multiple things and multiple avenues, and I'm not against any of that. So to make it clear, when I'm looking for a commitment of future agenda item, is the CRA money being reallocated in the 1792 corridor once legal has done whatever they've got to do, their due diligence, and agendize it for staff to bring us something to talk about.
So the assumption is that that will be reallocated to the 1792 CRA corridor. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, I don't know that we'd want to put it somewhere else. I mean, it wouldn't make sense. There's not a direct nexus to me. I mean, if it was intended
Well,
initially,
just so you know, I may not be agreeing to that.
understood, I'm just saying, that's my opinion.
There's a presupposition that the item that's coming before us is going to go toward your conceptual idea, and I'm saying that if that's how you want the item to come forward, I'm not going to commit now to agreeing to put that specific item on the agenda with that specific purpose, because it'll be in the general fund, and there may be other uses for it.
With certainty, I can say when the agenda item comes forward for you to sign off on the agreement to release those funds
First things
from
first.
the former Reagan Center agreement, there'll be $300,000 on the table that by law goes into the general fund. At that time, you can have a discussion as to how and where you want to allocate it.
That's what I think we're all taking.
Yeah.
One way or another.
That's what we're going to do.
And
perfect.
when that agenda item is scheduled, and hopefully sooner rather than later, may need some assistance getting that agreement executed, because the property owner now would also like to be considered for that funding. I will bring forward a presentation on some options in terms of continuing to use it for a catalyst-type project or other items within the 1792 corridor. And then certainly there are a multitude of options, but we can try to be creative with it since it was originally meant for the Reagan Center Catalyst project.
Sounds wonderful.
Perfect.
Any other discussion needed on this topic?
Nope.
Okay, that was 15 minutes. Okay. Let's go to item number 35, the American Rescue Plan Act.
Okay, so we're going to go right into that. Okay. Mind pulling the PowerPoint up. Thank you. I guess since it's a new item, just for the record, I'm Tricia Johnson. And before we get started with the actual ARPA update, at State of the County a couple of weeks ago, you all learned that our community services team has seen an increase in workload in terms of putting money back into our community by 7,000%, which doesn't even seem like a real number. So I wanted to take this opportunity to give Allison and Carrie some time to talk to you a little bit about where all of that money has been going. It's such a positive story to share in terms of how we've been supporting our residents for the last 2 years. So first, I'd like to have Allison join me at the podium. And would you like me to advance the slides for you?
Sure.
Okay.
Great. All right. Good afternoon, Commissioners. And thank you, Tricia. For the record, Allison Thal, Community Services Director. And I realize you are all very well aware of the makeup of community services. So for the purpose of this presentation, I'm actually only going to talk about briefly about the 4 specific areas in our department that have directly benefited from the plethora of federal funds that has been bestowed upon Seminole County over the past 24 months. So, our 4 key funded areas include our state and federal entitlement programs, our not-for-profit providers, 2 of the new key strategic priorities, community health and attainable housing, and finally, individual assistance. So, starting with our state and federal entitlement programs. Okay, these include our SHIP, CDBG, Home, ESG, and CSBG programs that we typically receive collectively about $6.5 to $6.7 million per year, give or take. But due to the pandemic, we have thus far received an additional $8.4 million in addition to our regular allocation that we are now encumbering and allocating. Total, this gives us $15 million that we are now needing to expend within my community development division. Now, for our local nonprofits, we typically receive about $842,000 each year from the general fund to specifically help these providers. Now, COVID has generated, by way of the CARES and the American Rescue Plan Acts, just under an additional $7 million that was earmarked specifically for our nonprofits. Couple this with the contributions from our municipalities' ARPA awards in the amount of about $469,000, and we are currently contracting out over $8.2 million within my community assistance side of the house on behalf of our nonprofits. Now, with the advent of our 2 key strategic priorities that are pertinent to community services, community health and attainable housing, each of these programs have been kickstarted with an additional $2 million of ARPA funds. Our municipalities have also contributed over $700,000 specifically to the mental health component of the community health initiatives, giving us a total of just over $4.5 million to manage and spend, which is being split between community development and community assistance. So last but not least, our largest infusion of pandemic cash has come to us by way of CARES, CRF, EMAP, ERAP 1, ERAP 2, and ARPA. Again, the municipalities have contributed over $1 million as well to help out. And all combined, we have and we continue to place over $54.5 million back into our community, assisting residents with their rent, mortgages, utilities, and deposits. So just think about this, knowing that we historically administer and spend about $450,000 for individual assistance each year. So all told, The entire Department of Community Services has been working and continues to work directly with no interruption since April of 2020, managing, dispensing, expending, and monitoring over $82.7 million from 10 separate funding sources. Overall, this represents about a 900% increase in funding on an average year for us and our department. Now I'm going to actually turn the podium over to Carrie Longsworth so she can share with you our individual assistance timeline and the latest impact of the Department of Treasury's Fiscal Recovery Final Rule. Carrie, she's all yours.
Thank you, Allison. Good afternoon, Commissioners. For the record, Carrie Longsworth, Community Assistance Division Manager. This, what you're looking at right now is literally just a timeline of all of the federal funding, the state funding that has come in for the COVID pandemic. This has nothing to do with our regular programs. We did obviously start to see an increase in need starting in April of 2020, shortly after COVID started to hit. No federal funds had arrived at that point, so we were using our county general revenue dollars to kind of handle that increase in need. We got the CARES money to do individual assistance in July. We launched that program August 26th of 2020, but those funds had to be spent by December. So we didn't start actually paying out payments until the end of September under CARES. So in 3 months, we pushed out about $20 million out into the community to do rent, mortgage, and utility assistance. On top of the CARES, the state decided, well, we also have funds that we'd like you to administer. So we pushed out another $3 million in our coronavirus relief funds. Those also had a December expenditure deadline. So we had our community development side kind of step in because we had 2 separate programs with very different rules, very different application processes coming into play. We did have, our staff was all in-house. We've been all in-house since June of 2020, just because it was not feasible for us to get this type of money out into the community working on a remote basis. While that was happening, the Department of Housing and Urban Development decided that you should also get entitlement funds. So we got our Emergency Solutions Grant, our Community Development Block Grant, and our Community Services Block Grant. All got large infusions that we had to focus on. Thank goodness they had a longer spend deadline, so we're still pushing those out, but we have been pushing those into the community. Those are more for our nonprofits. So most of our nonprofits have gotten those funds. We've run a few programs in-house, but most of that money has gone to our local nonprofits to expand their capacity as well. When we thought we met the December deadline and we were all set and ready to go, we were so excited, and then Treasury decided that Emergency Rental Assistance, ERAP, Part 1 was coming out, and they gave us those funds, $14.2 million, starting in January of 2021. We did launch that program. We did a pilot until we got our portal up and running, so we did assist people so there was no gap in service if they needed help. But we did launch that program March 1st of 2021. We were the first county in the region to get those funds out the door and into the residents' hands. One of the other big things just to note is that come July of 2021, we realized that we were missing a portion of the population that either didn't have access to a computer or were struggling technologically to upload documents into the system. So we opened the storefront in the Reflections Plaza, where we have computers set up. Clients can make appointments, they can come in. Someone will actually sit with them, walk them through the application, help them upload their documents so that they're not having that challenge or that barrier anymore. Throughout this, we have ranged anywhere from 5 to 15 temporary additional staff to try and move these monies out the door. When we had CARES in place with that short expenditure deadline, we had about 10 temps squeezed into office space trying to get those dollars out. We've received some additional home ARPA dollars. Those are from the Department of Housing and Urban Development. That's an additional $3 million that'll be working with some different affordable housing options, as well as the ARPA money that has been allocated for individual assistance, as well as what Allison talked about, the community mental health, nonprofits, and that sort. We have expended all of our ERAP 1 money. We were in the top 10 in the state of Florida to spend those dollars, and we're at about $1.4 million spent of our ERAP 2. So we are moving along. The staff has been working very diligently to get all this money out the door, and we are going to hopefully get that, as much of it wrapped up by the end of this year as possible. Something that does impact the dollars that have been allocated, this board did allocate $4 million for the American Rescue Plan to provide the additional assistance for the rent, mortgage, and utilities. This was initially set up to help those moderate income households, those workforce housing people that we have been talking about, which is 80% of our area median income up to 140%. We have had this program launched since October 1st. It's actually been a much slower demand than we anticipated. We've spent a little less than $250,000. City of Altamont and City of Sanford have come on board, and we've done a little bit of assistance in those areas. We've had about 10 households altogether that have received assistance in the cities, but we aren't seeing the spend that we would anticipate. The Treasury Department did decide to push out their final rule, which takes effect April 1. That does say that moving forward, ARPA funds can absolutely continue to be used for individual assistance. However, they are putting an income guideline on them now. We were at a place where we could do the up to 140%. So just for reference, a household of 4, that's $106,000 a year. So anyone under that could receive the assistance. Treasury has now released it as of April 1. The poverty guideline that's going to be used is 300% of poverty, which for a family of 4 is $79,000. So it's almost a $30,000 gap and drop of assistance. It actually closely mirrors the emergency rental assistance program, which is at 80% of the area median income. So we feel confident that with the emergency rental assistance program, which is countywide, that we can get most of the families that need assistance in this program and leave some funds in the ARPA program to assist those mortgages, because that is still a gap that's not provided in any of the other funding sources. But because we are dropping the income level so significantly because of Treasury, and there has been such a low demand for this program, we are recommending reallocating $3 million of the $4 million that was initially allotted into the good of the order for other such programs. And I'll turn it over to Tricia.
Before I move on with the remainder of the ARPA presentation, any comments or questions related to Allison and Carrie's presentation, since we'll move away from...
Commissioner Zimbo?
I want to thank both of you and your staff. Since this whole thing started rolling out this kind of money out of your department, in doing it in a professional and seamless fashion, why we often sit up here and reallocate or direct y'all. Great work. Thank you all very much. And secondly, I'd like to know your thought on the reallocation of the ARPA money and the downing of the income level to 79K. You know, there's some studies that just recently came out with what's going on in the world today that indicate in Central Florida, a family of 4 making $100,000 can barely make week to week. And I wonder, you know, if the Treasury's given us guidelines, are there other programs as this economy continues to climb from the standpoint of the costs? Do we have a safety net there for some of these individuals?
Back up. Commissioners, unfortunately, there's not a program that provides that assistance. Most of the funds that come from the federal government are limited to those lower income households. I agree there is a gap, absolutely, for the higher income, I wouldn't even say higher income, but the working households that really are struggling just to make ends meet. But unfortunately, the programs that are coming down are not set up to assist them.
Great. Thank you.
Carrie, I have a question for you. I know we said guidelines, but are those the requirements and not just guidelines?
The income guidelines?
Yeah.
Those are actually the requirements from the
So those are
Treasury
the actual
Department.
requirements?
Yes, as of April 1.
So are there any way to question those requirements because of the cost of inflation?
Not that I know of, but we will reach out to the county attorney's office and see if they have any opinions on it. We did talk to them about the rule that came out, and they agreed that that was, you know, kind of where we are stuck, but that's definitely something we can look at further.
Because we challenged it one time with an MSBU back in 2007, and they were able to reallocate a different number because of it, because of inflation.
Okay, we'll
Or the
definitely
down-
look into that. Absolutely.
Okay, moving on. As you know, individual assistance, we're recommending a $3 million reallocation from that program. Our small business grants program, as you know, we're operating it through our COVID sub-fund, which is currently $2 million. We've spent $565,000 of that. Out of ARPA, we have $1.5 million allocated towards small business. Because of the slow spend on the COVID sub-fund for small business, we're recommending reallocation of the full $1.5 million in ARPA dollars to programs where we have seen a greater need. And then we have our lodging incentive, which closed at the end of 2021. We have full and select service hotels participating, and $240,000 of that was not dispersed because the program closed. So we're recommending reallocation of $240,000. So all told, our reallocations to other programs within the county's ARPA program would be $4,740,000. As you know, when I presented at the end of January, we have received about $5.5 million worth of additional not-for-profit requests for funding, and these primarily focus on homelessness, mental health initiatives, and not-for-profit grants. We have reviewed all of these, and based on the initial review of applications, we are recommending funding recommendations at about $829,858. That's a very specific number, but I do want to share that I'm not asking for approval today of these funding agreements. They will be coming back to you. All of these not-for-profits are receiving over $50,000, and so they don't fall within that threshold. They all will have to report, and they will all be awarded funds on a reimbursement basis only. We have requested scopes of work from all of them and additional information from a few of them. So what I'd like to do today is just ask for your approval to proceed with the execution of these agreements. As we receive additional information from these not-for-profits, they will come back to you on the consent agenda, and we can discuss further, because I know there were some additional questions about some of the funding, and we're following up on those. But due to the timing, I wanted to at least proceed with what the committee has recommended, and then when the agreements come back to you, we can address any additional questions or feedback. So
Not yet.
just, yes, sir?
No, he was asked, do we need a motion? I said, no, finish yet, and we'll get the motion.
And so with respect to recommendations and next steps, we'd like to reallocate $4,740,000 in ARPA funds from small business, individual assistance, and lodging to, I'm calling it the good of the order for the time being, but the bottom line towards other programs. We'd like to award monies to not-for-profits that are above our current $400,000 not-for-profit program. Those are grants will come back to this board. Continue with the finalization of agreements and with cities and Seminole State College and so forth that are still out there. You will receive a attainable housing update. Allison will be doing that on April 12th. And I mentioned that because, as Allison said, we have $2 million allocated toward attainable housing. We need to start talking about what this board would like to do with those funds. And finally, you should receive an update on Rosenwald in April-May timeframe. I mentioned that because we have $3 million for community facilities, so that may be part of that conversation. But beyond simply awarding not-for-profit grants, we need to look at those allocations this board made last summer and determine exactly where those monies will go in the upcoming months, because again, everything does need to be encumbered, so to speak, by the end of 2024. And with that, I'm happy to address your questions, and Melanie is also going to give a brief broadband update for you.
Before we get to your questions, Shane, you have any written requests?
No, sir.
Is there anyone in the audience that'd like to speak to the board on these issues? We'll close public input. Direction from the board. Commissioner Lockhart.
Question. The reimbursable basis, what is the length of time and the deadline for any nonprofits that wind up with a funding agreement to commit the funds and submit back to us for reimbursement?
The monies have to be spent by the end of 2024, and I don't want to get too far in the weeds with the actual dates. I'm not certain if that means they have to have submitted for reimbursement by the end of 2024, if they have a grace period of 30 days, but they do all have to be spent by the end of 2024.
Follow-up?
Absolutely.
And if an organization is not able to spend their amount that's been allocated, what happens to those funds at that deadline at that point?
That's an excellent question, and it is worthy of discussion further with the team to determine should there be some sort of regular update. They will report on a quarterly basis, but to your point, they could discover at the September 2024, they're not going to spend all the money, and that doesn't give this board the chance to reallocate it. So I will work with legal and resource management on determining a schedule so that we can ascertain as to whether those dollars will be spent within a timely manner.
So part of your team that's looking at all of these applications will be taking into account the organization's ability to get the funds out the door?
Yes.
Okay.
Any other question? Commissioner Zimbauer?
Go ahead, Commissioner Herr.
I think with respect to the practical application on the other end of this, with respect to the ROM agreement, which is the one that we've gone through labor-intensive process to pull together, there is quarterly reporting, so.
ROM's not my concern.
I
We've got a
understand,
relationship
but the
existing.
template is already created in
That's great.
terms, and I would expect that we would do the same thing so that we don't end up in 2024 scrambling.
That's my concern.
That's the concern. So I think there's a mechanism to do that.
They do have the same reporting mechanism. The only thing and I will take this offline with the team, but is if we aren't seeing spending within a year,
Yep.
How do we manage that?
Yep.
So we'll talk further about
Yep.
that.
Thank you.
Commissioner Zimbauer?
Thank you. My inquiries goes right hand in hand with my fellow commissioners. Are we going to put together a backup list of those who've requested in the event those that have already been approved and we've said go, and they're not expending that, so that we don't end up at the last month going, oh my gosh, we could have helped these other entities, but we just didn't have them in the hopper to make it happen. That's number one. And number two, to be clear, this reallocation that you're asking our blessing on, we do have the ability to revisit and reallocate that again.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes, sir.
My concern is, with the inflation rate, with the state of things that are going on, some of our small businesses and individuals may begin to see some significant impact by the third quarter of this year. So that, I want to make sure. So thank you.
Certainly.
Commissioner Constantine?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If there's no other questions, I'll move the reallocation of $4,740,000 in ARPA funds, award $829,858 in not-for-profit grants to be brought back on consent agenda, and continue with finalization of pending agreements and requests of funding.
Second.
A motion, second discussion. All in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion passes. Thank you.
I'm glad somebody was
I actually do have another question, not with regard to this motion. At some point, I think we need to have an ARPA presentation for the board around everything other than nonprofit, because we're under the same gun for the spending of the rest. So we have roughly half of it that's allocated for revenue replacement, which, based on the report this morning, I'm not exactly sure how that's going to work. And we're going to find ourselves in the same exact position as the nonprofits are going to find themselves, with money going back to the federal government that we don't want to leave this community. We've got to put as much focus on that side of it as we are on this side of it. And it's probably not in that department.
Well, it is one thing that is not in community services.
One thing that's not.
So I do think that is the responsibility of myself and the ARPA team to keep our eye on the ball. And that's why I say Allison's going to come back and talk about attainable housing. We're going to talk about Rosenwald. And I'd like to have a better sense of this board. Would you like a monthly ARPA update? Would you like a bi-monthly? Do we want to take it based on activities going on? I'm happy to update you as often as necessary. Or we can, yes, sir.
Put together a schedule that you feel is necessary.
Okay.
Great idea.
Okay.
Commissioner Zimbauer?
For me, I'll take a briefing outside of this
Okay.
once a month, just to give me an update.
Okay.
And maybe the commission wants to consider maybe in that last year, beginning early 2024, that we really get an update on the dais, maybe on a monthly basis.
So I said, let her decide and bring it back to us.
Thank you.
Melanie?
Good afternoon, Melanie Kuntz, Assistant County Manager. Today I just wanted to give you a brief update on the broadband, as you wanted to know for how timely we are. As you may recall, we allocated $4.7 million towards the broadband project. We kicked off the project in January, and we've been working with the consultant Magellan Advisors. They indicate this is a 5-month project. They've been pulling together GIS layers that helps them understand the community better. And so what I wanted to talk to you today about was 2 exciting things that's happening. The first one is we've tentatively scheduled our stakeholder group meetings. And there's 8 group meetings. They are with the cities is one group, with education is another. We feel like we can get a lot from Seminole State and from Seminole County Public Schools and what they encountered while we went through COVID and their students were trying to learn remotely. So we're trying to gather all that information to put in this report. We're going to be working with some healthcare, and I don't remember all the others, but that's going to be happening within the next 3 weeks. But the exciting news today is our webpage will launch tomorrow, and with that will be a survey and a speed test. So it's very important that all of our residents, or it doesn't have to be all of them, but a lot of our residents actually take this speed test while they're at home. The best time for it to be done is 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. at night when there's the most demand on the internet. And that way we can get an understanding of what the speed is that they're getting in the evening, and we can have a better understanding of what their quality is. For those residents who don't have internet, we are providing posters and paper surveys to our forward-facing services like the libraries, the parks, maybe environmental services, as well as the cities. We've met with them, and they're willing to put them in their locations. And the cities, I believe, will put a link on their website pushing them to ours. So we're very excited about this. We'll be pushing the social media tomorrow as well, so you may get calls. But we wanted to let you know that we're moving, this is a very important step in this report to understand what our residents, what service and the quality they are receiving.
Thank you, Melanie. Questions? Commissioner Lockhart?
If you would tag us in those social media posts, it would make it much easier for us to retweet, reshare,
Yep.
whatever.
I'll let Ashley know, because I don't know how to do that.
Commissioner-
Happy to do that.
Commissioner Zimbo?
Ditto, Commissioner Lockhart. Thank you very much. I would like to know a schedule of the social media pushing out.
Okay.
What I have come to understand is often we do it once.
No, we're going to do this a little more often.
No, understood. So I'd like to understand a schedule. Is this going to be something that's going to just rotate and keep being pushed out
we'll
on a daily
see. I'll
basis,
get with
3 times
Ashley.
a week?
Yep.
Which sites are we doing it, Nextdoor, Facebook,
Okay.
whatever, et cetera, et cetera? And the reason I ask that is I continually get contacts in my office saying, hey, we learned about something, but it already happened.
Okay.
So for what it's worth, I'd like to
Perfect.
understand that. Thank you.
Another thing that we're going to do is monitor with Magellan what areas are responding. And if we find an area like in a week or 2 that we're not getting any responses, we're going to pull GIS addresses and postcard certain areas to make sure that they're getting the information. Because I feel like some people may not, especially if they don't have internet access, they may not be aware, or they don't go to a place like the library. So we're
That'd
going to
be my
try to
district.
target areas. So that's up my update.
Any other questions for Melanie Coots? Thank you, Melanie.
All right.
We'll now move on to legislative updates.
Okay, well, I had this all nicely written, and then it all fell apart about an hour ago. So this is the last week of session. Things change on an hourly basis. And what this board has been monitoring for the most part in the last couple of weeks has been an amendment that's been making waves with respect to the sheriff's budgetary process. That was in a Senate and a House bill, that the language was stripped on Friday. We celebrated, now it's in House Bill 3. So we are working mainly with the Senate because it is a priority of the House. This bill related to law enforcement is a governor priority, so chances are the House won't be able to do a lot with the language, but we're hopeful that the Senate can work with us, and both of our lobbyists are on top of it. Florida Association of Counties is on top of it, but just in case you aren't aware, the primary concern allows sheriff's offices the ability to alter components of an approved budget without BCC review and approval. Certainly not a criticism of our sheriff, but a lot of counties really do have some challenges and are concerned about this legislation. And of course, we never know what the future will hold, so we want to be vigilant as well. So we are monitoring that, working with our lobbyists to try to get that language stripped from the Senate version of the bill. With 4 days left, there's not a lot of room to put it in other bills, but there still is enough time. Other than that, it's important to know that 2 of our appropriations requests have been fully funded in the budget, which is great news. E.E. Williamson Road Trail Connect at $1 million, and Wekiva Springs Road intersection improvements at $500,000. So we're appreciative of Representative Smith for carrying those and Senator Broder as well. I know that Ron Book's office emailed all of you on Friday, I believe, about Senate Bill 1380 that is related to real property rights. They're watching that primarily for any amendments related to development, and there are no issues with that bill, so just wanted to mention that. And I know, Commissioner Constantine, you may have wanted to follow up on a couple things as well.
You know, thank you. Just the sad part about this House Bill 3, the Senate did strip this language off of their bill that was with Senator Book, and now they're putting it back on House Bill 3. And House Bill 3 is a priority of the governor's, which was giving all of the raises to the Highway Patrol. So, you know, it's a great bill, now with a poison pill in it. And unfortunately, I'm sorry, but I got to call it what it is. It's the Greenberg effect. The fact of the matter is Commissioner, you brought forward, and we all agree on transparency and accountability with constitutional officers and everything else, and this is the direct opposite. And once again, it's like the legislature, they would never give the governor the ability to take the general appropriation and just move it around. But they're offering this, throwing it back to us and the counties. And again, I agree with Tricia. In fact, our own sheriff does not like this provision. In talking to him both last week and last night, he is still, he feels that this is, you know, inappropriate. But unfortunately, there is a sheriff in Pinellas County who is their legislative director and wants to overturn a unanimous agreement of the Florida Supreme Court. And that's where we are. And there are some counties that this will be devastating to. And for our own purposes, 57% of the budget, our budget goes to the sheriff's office. So we basically would lose control of 57% of the budget once we approve it.
Anything else?
No, thank you.
Shani, is there any written requests?
No, sir.
Anyone in the audience would like to address the board on legislative initiatives that we have? Thank you. We'll close. Any comments from the board? Thank you. Well done. I'd like to reconvene. I'd like to recess the meeting for about 5 minutes and then reconvene to do the afternoon session. We'll take a 5-minute break. Reconvene the afternoon session. I'd like to ask the board to accept the proof of publication.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second. Any discussion? All in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion passes. Rules of the public hearing. Our staff will present each item for consideration. For staff's recommendation, the board will have the opportunity to ask questions of staff when the presentation is over. Applicant will then have the opportunity to speak. The board will also have an opportunity to speak, ask questions of the presenters. Members of the public interested in speaking either for or against the project to issue, please fill out the yellow speaker form located in the lobby, indicate the item number, whether you're for or against it, and place it either in the tray in the lobby, or please give it to Shaney that's here. Members of the board, members of the public will be allowed to be given public comments only one time per item. If you'd like to have your comments submitted to the record, please fill out the green comments form and again, place it in a tray or give it to our staff member, Shaney. Speakers should state their name and address clearly for the record, whether they're for or against. The speakers will be given 3 minutes unless they represent an HOA in its official position or in a legal organization or a group, and be given 6 minutes. If a board member has questions regarding the speaker's comments, the opportunity will be given once the speaker's time has expired. Speakers should limit their comments to pertinent information regarding to the agenda item. The clerk of the court that's here is required to obtain all documents, photographs, drawings, and anything that's presented to the Board of County Commissioners so that we can have a clear and precise public record. So you're going to have to leave it to the clerk. Once the speakers are heard, the applicant will be given the opportunity to rebut if necessary. It will not be another presentation, just a rebuttal. We'll close the public hearing, and then the matters will be handed to the commissioners for discussion and recommendation of the motion. Following the motion in a second, the board will make a decision, and a vote will be taken. Commissioners who do not cast a vote objecting will be considered in voting for the motion. Well, the board welcomes all comments from anyone with interest in the proceedings. Florida law requires the board's decisions and quasi-legislative actions be supported by competent, sustainable evidence presented to the board during the hearing of this. Competent, sustainable evidence is such evidence that is reasonable mind and would be accepted and adequate in support of the conclusion. There must be a factual basis in the record to support the opinion and testimony for both the expert and non-expert witnesses. The persons presenting testimony must rely on factual information that they're presenting, and that is presented to the staff and applicant's presentation. Anyone who would like to speak on this matter and is considered, please present your information. Any information that's presented here will have to be left with the clerk. Is there any commissioners that have any quasi-legislative information that needs to be presented? Commissioner Herr?
Has been submitted electronically.
Anyone else?
Mine as well.
Same.
Here's my ex parte communication. We can just send it to the clerk. We have one public hearing, which is quasi-legislative, quasi-judicial, which is Eden Park rezone. At this time, we'll hear from staff. This is item number 37.
Yes, good afternoon, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. Doug Robinson with Planning and Development. I'm here to speak about the Eden Park rezone item. So this is a request from the applicant to rezone from agricultural A1 to R1 AA single-family dwelling on approximately 6.99 acres located southwest of Bunnell Road and Eden Park Road. The applicant proposes a residential development consisting of 17 single-family dwelling units with a minimum lot size of 11,700 square feet, a minimum lot width of 90 feet, and a minimum house size of 1,300 square feet. The subject property and the surrounding area has a low-density residential future land use designation, which allows a maximum net density of 4 dwelling units per net buildable acre. The property proposes to access onto Eden Park Road, which is classified as an urban major collector. The site is located within the Seminole County utility service area and will be required to connect to public utilities for water. The site will meet all land development site requirements. There are no open space requirements for the single-family residential zoning district. Buffer requirements, which could include a wall or privacy fence, will be determined during the preliminary subdivision plan review. Staff finds the proposed rezone compatible with the surrounding development and consistent with both the allowable use and density provisions of the low-density residential future land use designation. Staff also finds the proposed rezoning to be consistent with the comprehensive plan. A virtual community meeting was held for this project on January 4th of 2022. I believe there were over 16 people in attendance at that meeting. The Planning and Zoning Commission recommended approval for this item at their February 2nd, 2022 meeting, excuse me. And so staff recommends the Board of County Commissioners adopt the ordinance, proposed ordinance enacting a rezone from A1 agriculture to R1AA single-family dwelling for a residential subdivision on approximately 6.99 acres located southwest of Bunnell Road and Eden Park Road. That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer your questions.
Any direct questions for staff at this time? Okay, thank you. This time we hear from the applicant.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, that's perfect.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and fellow commissioners. My name is Frank Coffin, FHC Development, 428 Main Street, Windermere, Florida. And first of all, I'd like to thank you for having me here today. This piece of property is part of the Lucas family's nursery holdings, and we're seeking to do a 16 or 17 lot subdivision. We concur with staff and P&Z's recommendation for approval. We went through this, and as you'll notice on the land use map, it's all future land use for 4 units to the acre. We're only going to have probably about 2.6, 2.7 units per acre, depending on whether we end up with 16 or 17 lots. We chose to go for the less intensive R1AA zoning versus the R1A 75-footers that you'll see are across the street. We did have a few concerned citizens we've been working with over the last few weeks. They were initially, a petition I think went around, you guys may have seen, but we've met with the people on that. Their two biggest concerns were lot size, which again, we addressed that and took the less intensive size, as well as their water concerns out there. Generally, the water flow out here runs west to east, kind of southeast to north, southwest to northeast. We've assured them that we'll be taking the water that comes on our site, we'll be dealing with that from the engineering standpoint and get it to the proper drainage channels and to the retention ponds and contain all our water on there. There's a gentleman directly to the north. I actually met with them on site yesterday with he and his wife, Mr. Creamer, and assured him that we would do nothing to add any water to his property, and we'll do whatever we need necessary to screen him off and keep that water from doing that. Whether that's, we can't determine at this time from the engineering because we don't have it yet, so whether that's a pipe conveyance system or even a small wall or something like that, we will certainly look at that during the engineering. And then to staff's comment on the buffer, we're willing to look at that as well, and homogeneous screening run there, probably put in the HOA like a 6-foot PVC privacy fence, and then include landscape buffering and whatnot. So
Thank you.
Here to answer any questions.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay. At this time, we'll go to the public. Shane, do you have any written requests?
No, sir.
Anyone in the audience that'd like to address the board on this item? Seeing none, we'll close public input. I don't see there's a need for rebuttal, so I'll go to the district commissioner.
Thank you very much. Members, I want you to know that back with the Planning and Zoning Board meeting, there was a lot of concern about this particular property from the citizens. Mr. Cawthorn and I met, and then at my suggestion, he met with the Creamers and others at their house yesterday, I believe. And the concerns that he illustrated and recognized earlier were, I'm not saying satisfied, but he said that he would address them. And that is a personal commitment by him to do that. And we always love to see it when we have problems or concerns by the citizens and the development community steps up to the plate, sits down, works with them, and solves the problem. So thank you very much, sir. And if there is no other questions, with that, I will move the approval.
Second.
We have a motion second. Discussion to the motion. Seeing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion passes. Congratulations. Okay, that concludes the public hearing. At this time, we'll go to the county manager report.
I just have one thing, Chairman. As you all know, we have the Home Rule Charter, and in that charter, Article 2, Section 2.3B, spells out that the Board of County Commissioners shall by majority vote confirm the appointment of department heads. Our fire chief for Seminole County is the equivalent of a department head, and I am seeking your confirmation today to have Matt Kinley be our next fire chief.
So moved.
That's great.
We have a motion,
Is that a motion?
You do.
Second.
and we have a second. Before we call the question, I wouldn't want to say that, Chief, would you mind standing down here for a moment?
Let's put him on the hot spot.
No, there's no hot spot. I mean, I will tell you that
I do good with hot spots, so.
Kinley,
That's right.
Kinley's truly been an asset to this county. We have the full confidence in Chief Kinley's leadership. He's always been not just an asset, but a leader in our county. Matt, you've always have a proven track record and have served and overseen just about every aspect of our fire department operations, and you're extremely qualified. I'm glad that you're taking this position. I'm glad that the county manager is recommending you, and it is truly a pleasure to be on this side of the dais, knowing that someone on that side of the dais with your qualifications is leading our men and women in the fire department. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments?
Yeah.
We appreciate a man of few words.
Well, I didn't know
Yeah.
if you were going to do something, and then I would
No,
talk.
I'm going to ask you to
or
speak,
talk
but
more.
Chief, I'm going to ask you to speak, but I want to make sure other commissioners may have something first.
Yeah, so Chief Kinley and I actually first met when I became an employee here in 2005, and got to know him and his leadership style, although he was not in a leadership role necessarily at that time. Yeah. And not to say lieutenants aren't leaders, that was not, gosh, please don't let the firehouses know that, misunderstand what I said. And I know, I have seen you over the years do a tremendous job in this organization, leading even from a position that isn't necessarily the top position in that organization, and even in other departments. You are very well respected, very well regarded. People look to you for your wisdom and your experience, and I appreciate that you're willing to take this role. That is, it's wonderful to see. And I want to thank Mr. Abel for putting forward someone from this organization who is invested here, has kind of grown up in this organization. I think it speaks volumes to your leadership style that you saw the qualities in Chief Kinley, that you would put him forward. So thank you for that.
Any other comments before we take the vote, and then we'll turn it over to you, Chief? Any other comments? All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign. Motion passes. Chief Kinley, the floor is yours.
So for the record, Matt Kinley, Fire Chief.
Yeah. You know what?
It's nice to drop the interim, and you're right. Joe Abel and I have had a lot of long conversations, and it's time for this organization. I'm humbled, honored to have the opportunity to lead the men and women of the Seminole County Fire Department. I'm going to be standing on the shoulders of a lot of great chiefs that have come before me. I commit to valuing our roots and embracing those new innovations in emergency services to better serve the public. And earlier in the meeting, it was nice to hear about succession planning because that's in our DNA. That's really built into us. And with my promotion, and again, thank you, along with Chief Johnsmeyer moving on to be the fire chief of the city of Lake Mary. I'm excited of the movement and leadership within the organization that's going to move all the way up through. This has been kept probably a pretty good secret, and I'm sure that there's some people watching right now just thinking about who's going to be the next 2 deputy chiefs, who's going to be the next 2 assistant chiefs, who's going to be the next 2 battalion chiefs, and it's really setting the stage for our organization for the next decade, I hope, of that core leadership that will be here. But I thank you very much, and we'll move forward.
Well done.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Abel, anything else on your report?
That's all the excitement I can stand for one day.
Mr. Paul Chipak?
No county attorney report at this time.
Thank you. This time we'll go to District Commissioner Report, District 3. District 3.
Thank you very much. No, I am. I'm just waiting.
That's District 2.
First of all-
That's District 2. He's District 3.
Thank you.
Oh, what's happening?
It's all right, we're all just numbers. First of all, I want to congratulate you, Commissioner Delory. I thought you did a great job at the Seminole Chamber.
Oh, thank you.
State of the county.
Well, to be honest with you, the people that should really be complimented is the staff. And the staff is, even I was the one standing up there, staff was the one that put the whole thing together. Staff was the one that helped me through it. And I can keep on saying staff, but they're the ones who should be complimented, not me. But thank you.
And I was, and I'm glad you did, because they did do a great job, I thought. Also, I wanted to thank Rick Durr. He's not here, but he and I went and did a tour of the Wekiva Golf Club before we had the public meeting that day on February 24th. And I got to tell you, I had been on that course maybe 20 years ago, but I think we've really got a great asset there. And I know that the citizens, we were talking to a number of people that were sitting at the golf club that day and everything, and all of them are just thrilled that the county is taking control of that asset. I also wanted to say that it was great to see some of our commissioners, Commissioner Delory, Commissioner Zimbauer, along with myself, at the Altamont Babe Ruth opening day. Over 1,500 people were there. It was amazing.
Can I interrupt you for a moment?
I'm sorry?
Can I interrupt you for a moment? So here, this young man showed me exactly what position he played when he was in Little League, correct? Shortstop.
What position did you play?
He played
Shortstop, really?
So he had to take me out there to actually show me some of his moves. I was quite impressed.
No, it wasn't.
Do we have film?
No, but I should have.
That's impressive.
We also had, you all might remember, there was a controversial ALF that was being developed called the Sanctuary down in Bear Lake. It was on Cub Lake Drive. But as you recall, we got all the citizens and the development team, the owners together, and it had its grand opening last week, and I will tell you, it's a metamorphosis that you wouldn't believe. It's the whole facility is just great looking. They have folks that have already signed up to move in, and the citizens are very happy with the whole circumstance that has come up. So that was really great to see. I also attended, along with Commissioner Herr and Commissioner Delory, the FDOT public information meeting on the truck and freight site. I love the site they picked for Seminole County. I also hope, and they are, and as Commissioner Herr pointed out and everything, we do need a lot of places, not just that location. But for Seminole County, I think that's a great location. Also, yesterday, they had the opening. I was very honored to be one of the speakers, but an opening for the Wekiva Parkway Section 6 Conservation Area, which certainly was the bridge underneath for the wildlife corridor. And I know people still are concerned, Mr. Humphreys, about certain parts of it, but I will promise you that they are working on it, and we will get those corridors, all of them, done correctly. And then, other than that, I'm looking, and just one other thing. In today, this morning, many of you get the sunburn, which is, talks about local things. One of the things that really concerned me and upset me, because we have been so good here at the county of, protecting people and bears as we go through that in District 5, District 3, District 1. We were the leaders throughout the state of Florida, and the FWC has recognized that, and that has been a point of pride for all of us. It seems that a couple of our residents have been feeding bears for over 2 months, 4 bears, and watching them, and their excuse was they didn't want them to starve. Ladies and gentlemen, please, the last thing you should do is feed bears. They are wild animals. They know you do not want them to become familiar, and all you're doing is potentially putting them at risk and in harm's way, as well as yourself, because if there is any contact, FWC will come down and they will unfortunately eliminate that bear, and it'll be your responsibility. So please, do not feed those bears. Abide by our ordinance, and let's protect the bears and leave them alone. They're wild animals, and they deserve your respect. Also, just one last thing, I wanted to thank and ask for a resolution of appreciation to Mr. Rich Donahue, who served on our Tourist Development Board Council, and in the same motion, I would like to appoint Mr. Don Doherty from the Weston Lake Mary to take his place in the TDC.
Is there a second?
I don't have a problem seconding that at all, but I want to make sure I've got confirmation that the appointments are being made the right. We kind of have had a little appointment questions going on. And I'm not questioning you, but there's been some juggling.
And here comes our expert down again.
Chris, you don't need to run.
It's quite a hike from up there. For the record, Tricia Johnson, Deputy County Manager. So thank you, Commissioner. The TDC can be a little confusing because there are 9 seats, 3 of which go to elected officials, 3 of which go to hoteliers, and 3 of which go to, in the statute, it says organizations that do not collect the tax, but we usually reserve those for attractions. So the 2 seats that are open are Commissioner Constantine's district seat, and then an at-large seat. And based on the openings, we have 1 for a hotelier, and we have 1 for an attraction. So I believe the at-large seat will be discussed as part of the chairman's report. But yes, Commissioner Constantine is appropriately appointing someone for his district seat as well as a hotelier.
Well, my second still stands. Thank you.
So we have a motion and a second, correct?
Yes.
Okay, any discussion to the motion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, like sign. Motion passes. Commissioner Constantine?
That's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We'll now move on to District 5.
So I, too, wanted to congratulate you on a job well done and say thank you to staff for making us all look good during the state of the county. I've had a lot, you all know I'm a member of the chamber, I've had a lot of really positive feedback about it, and quite honestly, it was nice to have fun with you guys instead of just doing what we do when we're together. So a huge shout out to the SGTV guys that did, and whoever did all of the editing that made us look like we knew what we were doing. That was pretty cool. I also want to give a shout out. You heard at one of our meetings, I think it was the last one or the one before that, about Commissioner Lockhart receiving the award in the state for being the trustee of the year. She is also now a finalist at the national level. So the American Association of Community Colleges announced their finalist, and she is one of the finalists. So pretty darn cool. I do want to send out an official big thank you to Sean Lozier and Rick Durr for working together. He is a library board appointee, and he has taken it like we would want everybody that does this stuff to take it. He's run for chair, he's now the chair, and he is getting people very engaged, and I think he's going to be a really positive influence, so it's pretty cool. And Rick is wrapping resources around him to make sure that that happens. I would like to point out that for a mere $25,000 in the annual budget, we can do an annual mailer of the bear mailers to the bear neighbors to stop people from feeding them, because it's not just the people that move in, it's people that are in the houses too that forget these rules. And so I would say we should advocate for that. It's a drop in the bucket compared to what we do. And we may actually save some human injuries and bear lives. And then the last thing that I wanted to bring up, and this one is actually really important, is following up on the county manager search process and the process for that. It is my understanding that the next steps, as they are intended today, is that the candidates would be surfaced, they would be screened, the best candidates would be sent to us, and then we take it from there. I would advocate that our directors or some subset of our management team needs to be involved in this process. The single greatest thing that the county manager has to do is have a staff that actually will follow the leader. And having folks that don't have any input into who that leader is not something that would happen in any other organization that I've ever been part of, and I can't fathom it happening here. So I just want to bring it to our attention that that right now is not slated as a step in our process, and I think it needs to be.
If there's no objection, since we don't have a full board here, if we can wait to the next meeting, we'll bring it back.
I'm not sure why we would
object to that, yeah.
Yeah, so we gave direction, there was consensus of the board, we gave direction to the consultant to develop a stakeholder engagement plan, and part of that was engaging employees. So I think.
Then I misunderstood.
I mean, that was, I think, of something that
So
was
I'll-
discussed.
So
It was discussed, and I'll also go on record and say, we all know these meetings are every other Tuesday, and I book my whole day for it, whether I think it's going to be a full-day meeting or not. And so I, with all due respect,
I will speak to Mr. Applegate to find out where we're at and to see how that public input is going to take place.
If you'd like to make that
It's
an
not
motion,
pub-
I'll second it.
and I will make a motion. I would make a motion that some level of our senior management team is involved in the interviewing process, if not the screening process, of the candidates for county manager. And that can be determined between Mr. Slavin and probably Bryant to make sure that it checks all the boxes. And I'll stop there.
Second.
Good, Constantine.
I was just going to say, because I thought we had already agreed to that.
But it's not planned.
That's why I said, let me speak to Mr. Applegate to see where it's at, to talk to Bob Slavin to report back to us. That's what I was trying to get at.
I have no problem with the staff being involved in in meeting with any potential candidates. I think that's fine. I don't know about the interview process, and I think that's what you said in the thing, but meeting with them, talking with them, getting to know, I think that's a wonderful thing.
So let me be clear. I believe that the staff needs to be involved in the screening process with us. It doesn't matter if we bring in King Tut, for the only thing the word I want to say, I can't say. It doesn't matter if the staff is not willing to follow. So this chemistry is a big part of the ability to lead an organization. It is fair to the new leader to have them have the opportunity to speak with and be interviewed by, because that will bring out what concerns are, where direction is, where things are needed, in addition to fair to our team, that they get
The only question
some
I have
input.
there is that when the vote does come down, it's the five of us that make the vote.
It is.
Right.
And so there's not a sixth person.
There's not a sixth version. I would not advocate that. What I would say is that a typical process would be that the screening comes from Slavin's operation through our team, and the finalists get sent here, and it goes from there.
Thought we already had a process.
I followed up on it this week, and the answer was, you're getting the list of candidates to interview.
I think it's important that we reiterate what our expectation is, and I think that's why it's important that it was made in the form of a motion. I know all of us have gone through different levels of searches. I can tell you for our search for Dr. Lorenz at Seminole State College, we had stakeholders at every level of the organization involved in the process. Actually, in a committee, we had an entire day set up where we brought in members of different parts of the team at the college to ask questions of each finalist, each candidate, so that they could get a feel for what the potential leader would be bringing forward. And then we were given that feedback from the consultant from each of the members that were assembled. It was a very...
That's different than what I'm hearing here.
Well,
I'm at least,
I'm just
staff was
giving
one
an
component of
example.
that. I was part of that. I was a community member that was part of the search committee for Dr. Lorenz as a member of the foundation board back then. And there was a team that was staff, there was a team that was foundation members, there was a team that were educators, there was a team, I think they had students. And the feedback was all gathered by the consultant. I don't know that we need to go to that elaborate approach that touches 30-some thousand students. But I do think we can't be isolationists, that the five of us know better than anyone.
I didn't think we were. I thought we had a process. I'd still like to talk to Applegate to ensure that that process is being followed. If we're going to make changes to the process, I think that Commissioner Zimbauer should be here.
Well, then Commissioner Zimbauer should be here.
Is that process documented? Because I've asked for it. Do you have it?
I'll go through the minutes and pull it out, see what we have. Well, I'll pull the minutes up and see what we discussed.
We discussed
Okay.
it.
Okay, I don't have any problem in the staff meeting and talking with and questioning any of the candidates. And if that's what you're asking for, I'm more than happy to.
That's not what she's asking for.
But if that's what.
That is a portion of what I'm asking for.
If that's what you're asking for, I'm more than willing and happy to support that right now, because I think that's important. If you're asking them to rank them and stuff, I'm not, I wouldn't do. I'm not in support of that.
I think the reason we hired a consultant is so that we could use them as the gatherer of consensus and feedback, and that's why we're paying him. And one of the things that this board gave direction to him that we wanted to be a part of was stakeholder feedback.
And I agree.
Right. So Commissioner Herr is extrapolating from that and saying there should be a plan for that, and there is no plan for that to happen right now. Let me just finish the thought. That feedback from those employees, those stakeholders, at whatever level they may be, to come back to the consultant, to be brought back to us, is critical in our decision-making, I would imagine, because even though we are the five who get to vote, we are selecting the leader of the organization for the entire team. And their feedback and input is critical in that decision-making process. So, no, they don't get a vote. They're not the sixth person. But I think the fact that Commissioner Herr has brought it forward, and the fact that it's not being seen in a timeline as a part of the process that we all gave the direction to have happen, is concerning. And so the motion in the second is to ensure that that is continuing to occur.
I believe that during our discussion where we talked about the process, was asking the consultant to do what you're talking about. I believe it may not be documented, and there may not be a document somewhere that you looked, but we'll make sure that that's happening, because that was discussed. That was discussed.
It was definitely discussed.
I'm not disagreeing with you. It was discussed.
So is there a problem with solidifying it in a...
Well, just exactly what Commissioner Constantine talked about, where, we talked about that, and it should be happening. If it's not happening, I don't know why it's not, but it should be happening.
So the motion, if I can, Mr. Chairman, to allow them, the senior staff to meet with,
It's not just senior staff. I know that, but it shouldn't be just about senior staff. It should be stakeholders. That's what it should be about. Stakeholders, not just senior staff.
My motion for today was to assure that at least that piece was shored up. We want to take it to stakeholders, I'm good with that. We want to make it broader, I'm good with that. For that, potentially, Commissioner Zimbauer should be here. But staff cannot be left out of this process, and I'm getting that shored up today. That's the motion.
so again, to confirm the fact that what Commissioner Delory and Commissioner Herr are both saying in different ways is that I think we all agreed, and because we're not talking about stakeholders right now, we were just talking about senior staff, because we all agree that stakeholders need to be part of it too, but that's a broader question. But that senior staff have the opportunity to meet with the candidates and question them. Again, I have absolutely no problem with that, and let's support that, and that's the motion. If that's the motion, I'm willing to say yes right now.
Is that the motion?
I'm good with that motion.
Okay. Okay. And the second it confirms?
Yes.
Okay. Let's call the question. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passed, because that's not the way I understood it, but okay. Commissioner Herr, what else?
I think that's it.
Okay. District 4.
Right. Wanted to say thank you so much to everyone who participated in the gardening expo at the Extension office last weekend, 2 weekends ago. It was February 26th. If you haven't been out there for one of those expos, I guess we didn't have one last year because of COVID, but so much goes into making sure that that day goes off without a hitch, and it was done professionally. It was done with absolute inclusion of all sorts of organizations, private sector, public sector, nonprofit organizations. It was just wonderful to see everybody out there. The museum was open. Shout out to Bennett Lloyd and some of his team members for being out there. What a great opportunity to have so many people on that property and get a chance to see our wonderful museum. It was just a wonderful day, and I know how much effort goes into it, and so thank you to everyone that was a part of it. It was really great, and I took home a beauty berry. What is that? It's a Florida native that has these great purple berries on them. They're great for birds and bears. And the rumor is that if you take a leaf off of a beautyberry bush and you rub it on your skin, or that it's it's a mosquito repellent. So I'm going to test that out.
God, you need that.
Yeah, right. So and thank you to the Native Plant Society, the Fern Couplet chapter, for being out there and selling all of those fantastic native plants, because it was great.
Is it a no-see-em repellent? Because that would be even better.
I don't know. I'll test it out. I'll bring a couple leaves. You can rub them on your skin and see how it works. Also want to share a scholarship opportunity. True Health, who we partner with in different ways around this county, is offering a Path to True Success scholarship, and this actually goes to some of our conversation earlier about people participating in a career in public service. So it's a new scholarship designed to award 4 different students, first-generation college students, pursuing a degree and a career in public service, $1,000 scholarship each. The window for the application is open until April 29th, so if you go to True Health's website, there's lots of information there about applying for the scholarship. So if you know of any students, children of maybe employees or other people in the community that might be interested in applying for that scholarship, please spread the word. That's all I have.
Great. District 2.
Thank you. First and foremost, staff has not advised you all, is the Sustany, Orange County, huge development project, also known as Lake Pickett North, which goes right up against our rural boundary. in the County Road 419 Lake Pickett area is moving forward through Orange County's Development Services and scheduled to come before their board here in the near future. Staff has been monitoring our planning staff, so I appreciate that very much. If you'll just keep everybody up to speed on that. Had a meeting with the Coalition Against Bigger Trucks. Not a whole lot of real big news there. I mean, I've known about these folks for years. Long and short of it, trying to keep the bigger, more heavier trucks off the roadways. And there's a move, of course, countrywide to have younger drivers, bigger trucks, all kinds of things going on. So that's why I think some of the other commissioners have met with them as well. Last weekend was opening baseball. It's Altamont Springs. It was good to see some of my fellow commissioners there. It was a great outing. I was shocked to learn that there was approximately 1,000 children in that program. I think the most they've ever had. Also, for those, we did take Wide Open West on a tour of my district, which is the new our broadband and telecommunications company coming into Orange, Seminole, and Volusia County to give them a lay of the land and help them understand how it lays out. I think they were going to make meetings arranged with other commission offices as well. I would like a letter of appreciation and resolution of appreciation to Janine Ellison for sitting on the Seminole County Historical Board.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign.
Thank you. Our office is also looking for a replacement for this board as well as the Code Enforcement Board, and I'll bring those forward here in the near future. Also a reminder that the Econ Basin Study is at the Canterbury Center, 6 p.m., which is located in Oviedo. That is for the Econ Basin Study, and as Commissioner Delary knows, as a private citizen, I've been pushing for this for probably 25 years. So I'm glad that it's finally kicking off, and glad that John Dredge and his group are now going to have what appears to be basin studies across this entire county, which ultimately is good news for our citizens, good news for them, to have a clear understanding of what's going to be happening moving forward. So that concludes my report. Thank you very much.
Thank you. District 1. You may not be aware of it, but there are a couple of MSBU's in this county that the board confirms the appointments that they vote amongst themselves. One of them is Lake Pickett. The other one is Horseshoe Lake. And the people that requested to be put on that is because Horseshoe Lake is both in the city and the unincorporated. I think it's almost half in the city and half in the county. And the city liaison would be Brian Kirshner, filling an unexpired 3-year term expiring December of 2025, and Patty Searcy to serve an unincorporated liaison in 3-year term expiring 12/2025. I would also say that even though she goes by Patty, it's really Colonel, and I have a hard time calling her Patty because of her designation and her time to serve in this country. I'd like to make a motion appointing those two individuals to the Horseshoe Lake MSBU.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye.
I would
Opposed,
have a discussion. It's great work. I remember, again, as a private citizen, those folks asking me to come speak to them as an MSBU member and how that all unfolded. And I've come to understand that folks at Horseshoe Lake have arrived at a good place and good work's happening over there, so fantastic.
Also, I know Commissioner Zimbar, you brought up substantive development, which is Lake Pickett North. There's a meeting on March 29th, end of this month, in the East River High School cafeteria at 6 p.m. I'd like to ask the county manager to instruct one of his staff members to go there to give us an update on what's going on so that we can be brought up to speed on that. I'd like to see if there's consensus to ask the county manager to do that.
Absolutely.
Is that okay, Joe?
Could that
Great.
include the difference between what we have already voted against and what they are now proposing? We voted against the previous, Lake Pickett.
No,
project.
it's not Lake Pick. Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah, Lake,
Yeah.
yeah, the lake, well, whatever it's called, Sustany.
Yeah.
We voted against it as a board. Now they're putting up a new project, just so when we're doing the report, the difference between the two.
You'd like to
what
see,
was-
you'd like to see a comparison?
Yes, absolutely.
I think that's reasonable to ask.
Sure.
Is that okay?
Yes, sir.
And I'll probably be attending that meeting as well, just FYI. After the supervisor election, Chris Anderson presented his presentation. There was a citizen here. Shaney gave me this form. The person's name is Michael Toff, I think it is. I think so. I can't really read his writing. He wanted me to basically express, because he missed it, he doesn't see a need for the building because he believes that the supervisor of elections only holds a couple of megabytes of data, and it should be held on a laptop or two, and don't spend the money. Just wanted to make sure that that was in the record, because he wanted to make sure that his voice got heard. And then, under the chairman's report, there's an at-large board appointment for the Committee on Aging. Staff is recommending Shannon Campbell for the Elderly Cares Attorney to fill the attorney's vacancy for a 3-year term effective March 3rd, 2022, ending March 8th, 2025. And the Tourism Development Council appointment, staff's recommending Judith Dorses, General Manager of the Oviedo Mall, filling a 4-year appointment effective March 8th, 2022, ending March 8th, 2026. And the Library Appointment Committee they're recommending Daniel Kavanaugh, Associated Attorney at Holland & Knight, LLP, to the Law Library, to replacing Tom Green, who retired in February. This appointment will be a 3-year term effective March 8th, 2022, ending March 8th, 2025. That is my motion.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? All in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, like sign. Motion passes. So I know we've all been told, and we've heard, and we've read, that the I-4 express lanes are now open, and I wanted to make sure that everyone has a map. I've not ridden on them. Oh,
I have.
okay.
Multiple times.
And I've heard from people trying to figure out where the entrances are and where the exits are. So I thought it'd be appropriate for me to hand out maps.
And there's at least 2 motorists trying to figure out how somebody got going the wrong way.
I'm not going to go there, but, okay.
I just
Went
want
on
to
there
point
just
out
to
that
see how it worked, and I felt like I was on a freeway, I mean,
the Audubon.
the racetrack.
This will eliminate marital debate.
Okay. I'll take your word for it. And then, what?
I mean, I seriously have been on them probably 6 or 7 times since they've been open, because I go down to downtown Orlando quite a bit. But I didn't find it to be terribly difficult.
I didn't say it was, but I just wanted to make sure everybody has a map.
It concerns me that we have people who really can't figure it out.
Oh,
You would be surprised.
you should see what I do in my private, how crazy things end up. Like,
Really?
how did this crash happen? Like,
I
really?
I will tell you that the one place that is not confusing, but because it's a new entrance right there on Center Point, oh my God, that is, you go up there now, and in the past, you just go over the bridge, right? Now you've got that thing, so you've got to stop. There were people that were just zooming off of I-4, getting back onto Center Point without even looking.
Wow.
So that is the one place I would.
Okay, well, I'll have to try that one. I haven't done
Yeah,
that.
that's.
You didn't see that
scary.
one? You didn't see that one?
No, I didn't get off on it. I didn't get
Just
off.
teasing with you. Okay, next item I have is some upcoming potential work sessions. Staff is asking for a visioning plan and a comprehensive plan evaluation appraisal report work session. I think we emailed this to everyone. I'm just handing out a hard copy. We're looking at July 12th. I know it's some time away, and this is going to be the format. If there's no objections, we're trying to do a morning session, a lunch, and an afternoon session. And I want to make sure the board sees that. And then with the Land Development Code, we're looking at we're looking at additional schedule, and it's on April 19th. And I just want to make sure that everyone has that as well. And I want to pass this out. I know it's been emailed to everyone as well.
So
I'm confused.
So my first thought was when we canceled the July 12th board meeting, I took that to mean we weren't having a meeting on July 12th. So I've already made plans.
Okay.
As have I.
I'm sorry, I didn't realize that that was still on the table for something being scheduled, or I would have kept it blocked.
Okay. We're just trying to figure out when, Mary, you mind coming forward? Staff had a meeting with me this past week, or I shouldn't say this week, last week. This is the beginning of the week. Last week to discuss the complexity of this land development code and all the other meetings that are happening.
Yeah. So this is specifically for the vision year process. So we are statutorily required to submit the year report on December 1st of 2022. So it seems a long time away, but that's fastly approaching. Our consultant has committed to getting that report done by that deadline. But the longer we postpone any work sessions, it impedes their ability to put in your input in a meaningful way into that vision report. We had requested the July 12th because that was tentatively a work session based on those Tuesday scheduled meeting dates. Our consultant is available on July 21st or 22nd as well. That is a Thursday or a Friday. If those dates worked better, we could also go longer. We could go into an August meeting, but again, the longer we wait, the less input you guys could have on that document.
Mary, if there's no objection, if the board members can get with my assistant Kendra, we'll try to figure out a more acceptable date.
Absolutely, yes. We're here, we want to work around you, so that's fine.
I don't want to just pick a date right now.
Yeah.
So so
Commissioner?
we're looking for like a 9 to 3. If we made it a working lunch, could it be a 9 to 1 kind of?
Could be.
So I think we had worked in some time for some wrap-up, so that's why we got to that 3 o'clock deadline. So
Okay.
the idea was there was going to be some working lunch availability, and then work in some time for that wrap-up session. So that's that 3 o'clock. So it could go a little bit shorter, but we wanted to give you the full length of that opportunity.
Right. Well, it's obviously incredibly important, and we need to do it. We have three weeks in June already scheduled with meetings, and we have the 19th and the 26th in July.
Let's circle back around where we're not just picking dates here.
Well, no, I'm just saying those are dates that we're already meeting, and as a concept, if we can make sure that a meeting with a short agenda actually is a short meeting, then maybe we could use an afternoon for this.
That would be tight, just
Okay.
limiting it to the afternoon, but again, we will make it work. So, our consultant has committed to that, and we want to make sure we get your input, and whatever time we have, we will make sure it's valuable, but the 9 to 3 seem to make it the most sense for us.
Got it.
Mary, we'll
Understood.
circle
All
back
right,
around.
thank
We'll
you.
figure out what everybody's calendar is.
Okay.
Thank you for coming out.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, it's the end of my chairman's report. Future agenda items, do we have any requests from the public?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I think I have one hand that's raised. Would you mind coming forward? Please give us your name and address for the record. We need a paperwork.
Fill out the form, Joe. Give it to us early.
I should give you one of both colors.
Please give us your name and address for the record, and you'll have 3 minutes.
My name's Joseph Humphreys. I live at 883 Cardinal Point Cove, Sanford, Florida. And in full disclosure, I was neither summoned here today, nor am I being compensated for the comments that I'm about to make.
Good to know.
Infomercial?
Yeah, but there's more.
You now have 2 minutes and 43 seconds.
I was at a recent meeting in Oviedo, and Chris Anderson was the keynote speaker. Commissioner Zembauer was there. And I was impressed by his energy and his general approach to business. And the 2 words that he couldn't pronounce enough were transparency, accountability. Transparency, accountability. And I certainly agree with that. I heard this morning in this morning's sessions comments about trust, bureaucracy, dealing with bureaucracy. merit, all things that I certainly support. In reference to the upcoming county manager's selection, I kind of have to dovetail with the comments that I heard earlier. This is a copy of the Professional County Management, the Benefits to Your County from the ICMA. These are the people that a lot of these managers are members of. And it talks about the things that you need in a good county manager. Encourage inclusion and build consensus among diverse interests, including those of elected officials, the business community, citizens, staff, focusing on the entire community rather than the centralized interest of one or two individuals. Not that anybody here does that. Also, to develop and sustain organizational excellence and promote innovation. It's interesting in my research on this, again, I have family members that are involved with government at different levels around the country. Durham County in North Carolina, an area that we own real estate in, last October, they put out a press release, community input sought in selection of the next county manager. Durham County is committed to involving the community in the hiring of Durham County's next county manager. The public is invited to be a part of the highly competitive hiring process by participating in the survey. And it's a community that's very comparable to this county. The interesting thing is, and they did a survey, and I've got copies of the survey, and again, I've got tons of paperwork. But the interesting thing, as they turned out, is that the county, the residents were absolutely impressed and supportive of staff and their government because they had the opportunity to participate. So I would urge this board to consider how to engage both staff, which I think, again, is extremely important, having been in that situation myself, and also the citizens. Not asking for a big grand meeting that we all sit and have a vote, but I think input to you that have to make the final decision, I think, is important. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
Anyone else in the public like to address the board?
There's no one left.
And just for the record, we did have some conversation, Commissioner Zimbauer, regarding this earlier. We did make a quick motion. I shouldn't say quick. There was a motion to make.
We actually made a quick motion on this board?
We actually did.
Motion is always
No,
quick.
that's because I wasn't here, right?
That's right.
I did not say
I
that.
knew that's what I was going to say.
Second.
But we talked about ensuring that the staff has input, and that I'm sure that this board will also agree that the citizens should have input as well. And so,
I would concur with that, and I think we've got to be careful what that, quote, involvement is. I think if it's done in a proper professional way, asking for opinions through a survey, input, their desires, I think all that's great. But getting a bunch of them in a room to have a discussion, I think is a recipe for disaster.
I think the proper way to do that is to ask Paul Chipok to, I'm sure that Mr. Applegate's either watching this meeting or is already will be watching the meeting, but ask Mr. Chipok to instruct Mr. Applegate and
I have my page of notes here right
Bob Slater. I'm just repeating it, Paul. I know you're very astute, but it shouldn't come from me. It should come from your office.
Yes, sir.
Well, and I think this is going to be time sensitive as well.
That's why I'm making sure that Mr. Chipok is doing that. Not that he wouldn't do it. Any other comments for the good of the order? Seeing no other public input, this meeting is now adjourned.
Brandeis filed our